Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Seekers Forum. So, today we're going to be talking about the senses and pleasure and how it is that we can cultivate enjoyment in our lives, even in times like we find ourselves in today. Last month, we explored the wisdom of the Stoics and their principles of self trust and personal conduct that have helped people over millennia who are confronted by uncontrollable circumstances to keep their balance and stay connected to that part of themselves that is able to make clear choices. When we choose character over dissolution and hope over disaster, and take the long view of immediate circumstances so as not to be defeated by fear or pain, we step into spiritual maturity and the power that we have to weather the storm. And yet, just as the long view, that 40,000-foot perspective, is important in freeing us of attachment, the immediate short view is equally necessary. While it's crucial to keep an eye on the metaphysical, in order not to get too bogged down in the body or material things, it's also critical, particularly under duress, to stay connected to the physical world and the delights of being alive, as any self respecting yogi will tell you. When you plant yourself firmly in material form, anchor in the breath, when you attend to the sinews and the bones, it interrupts the thinking mind and it returns you to the simplicity of the present moment. Just this breath, this bite, this step, this touch, this sound, this view. Locating ourselves in our bodies, noticing moment by moment changes and taking pleasure in the experiences that awaken the senses enables us to lay claim to this blessed incarnation of ours and also honor the intelligence that gave us life. This month's guest speaker in the Seekers Forum, Thomas Moore, talks about this beautifully in an interview that you'll be getting next week. And he says, quote, "Pleasure, like a glass of wine after hard work, stops the world, preparing an individual to be more receptive to the subtle nuances of his environment, luring him into reverie and reflection. Pleasure is a time out." Isn't that beautiful? Pleasure stops the world. And it does that by interrupting the cogitating, conceptualizing, worrying mind and allowing us to simply be where we are. Pleasure offers a time out to remember the comfort of being inside our own skins. And it allows us to reclaim our rightful place in the garden, in the biblical sense, even when that's a challenge. Now, this question of where we belong in the mythological garden is really important. What we believe we deserve, how we believe we're judged, goes to the heart of how we experience our lives. If you view yourself as never having left the garden, still being in this state of connection and innocence, you live very differently from someone who sees himself as guilty of original sin simply by virtue of having a sensory body and curiosity. It's the difference between spending our lives trying to redeem ourselves and using that same time recognizing how whole and alive and connected we already are. It's the difference, in other words, between living in illusion and living in truth. Now, these days, it's easier than ever to take on a kind of morbid mindset and fall into dread and apocalyptic thinking. And that's why it's so important that we pay attention to both sides of reality, both the destruction and the renewal, both the horrors and the equally real displays of emotional and spiritual greatness that we see around us. Shoots of green are springing up from this mess, and their arising is a part of nature. As a species, we are giving rise to new possibilities, even as the darkness mounts around us. Both are true. There is destruction, there is death, there is fear, and there is effulgence, and there is beauty, and there's grace. So, why is pleasure so very important in spiritual life? It's because delight and play and enjoyment are nature's way of renewing us in body and spirit, as well as in the mind. Remember that in philosophical systems such as Buddhism, the mind is considered a sixth sense. We feel, touch, smell, and taste with the mind as well as with our other senses. And that's why thinking can intensify feeling. Pleasure, in fact, is inseparable from the mind, which is, after all, the seat of our imagination. The mind delights in touching sense objects, including intellectual ones. For many of us, nothing replaces the extraordinary pleasure of learning, for example, or reading, or deep conversation, or debate, or confession, or writing. Indeed, writing is among the most sensuous of all activities. With your mind activated and your fingers moving, you become a kind of bridge between the inner and outer worlds. You become a partner to your imagination. There's an actual tactile thrill in feeling the music of language spilling through your fingers onto the page or the screen. Now, of course, the mind can be a foe as well as a lover, but it's the lover that interests us today, in that it applies to this connection between pleasure and awakening. Now, in this lila, this dance of life, the senses are our constant companions. They're waiting for us to take the lead and not expect them to give us wisdom. This is very, very important. The senses aren't wise, thank God. The senses are wild, they're untamable, they're shot through with life's primal energy, but they are void of discernment, judgment, or temperance, which are the province of reason. It's the interaction between reason and desire, both of which are crucial, that defines the choices that we make. And in fact, it's the tension between reason and the senses that intensifies erotic desire. Because desire is made stronger by limitation. That's one of its paradoxes. The ways that we channel our desire actually build our desire and make it more formidable. And that's true not only of sex, but of all pleasurable activities. We like to imagine that an absence of limits, total freedom, is the path of satisfaction. But in fact, the opposite is true. To the degree that reason comes into play and the practical mind puts limits on desire, pleasure is actually amplified. And this is the genius of Tantra, where polarities are used to balance and increase one another. It's also why pleasure is a spiritual discipline, like everything else that we do. It requires awareness for it to mean anything. Just think of eating or prayer or music or parenting, time spent in nature. All of these potentially pleasurable experiences mean nothing when you're not present to enjoy them. Attention brings the world to life. We're reminded how miraculous this creation is. It's only when we forget to be fascinated by life that we fall into despair, awe, deprivation, and even addiction. After all, at its root, addiction is the inability to feel. When we're addicted, we're caught in an unconscious indulgence of purportedly pleasurable activities that fail to give us pleasure. In the desperate struggle to get satisfaction, we end up destroying ourselves. The more pleasures contemporary life throws at us, the more numbed we become to their charms. And that's why many people I speak to these days are quite happy to be simplifying their lives during this pandemic. Getting back to basics, slowing down, appreciating what they do have. This is happening organically, and it doesn't register for many of us as deprivation. I'd like to read you a poem that I just received today from a student in a course I'm teaching called Journey to the Sacred. And they were asked to write about wonder and awe. And this poem truly captures what I'm saying about how limitation intensifies awareness. Here's the poem. A spider built its web last night, spinning rainbows, climbing, descending. Awe. The child a few houses down is practicing at the piano, picking out notes, starting over, finally playing the song. Wonder. Walking down the hill, I'm stopped by the scent of fresh sage. Looking for it, I notice instead a bank of lavender. Awe. This morning before work, feeling tight, I sit in pranayama for 10 minutes. My horizon broadens. Wonder. The fog banks in against the hills, the fog recedes. The ocean is blue, the ocean is gray. Mallards have appeared, and their voices join the chorus of crows, owls, and my own laughter. The day is strung with these moments, a rosary of awe and wonder. 8 weeks ago, I noticed none of it. Did not have a morning meditation practice, did not know I was so blessed to live here. I see my true hair color for the first time in 40 years. It's silver, and I'm awestruck every time I catch a sight of myself in the mirror. Wonder. The virus is death and destruction, yet such beauty unfolds around me. I haven't felt this way in so long, maybe ever. Tomorrow there could be bad news. Tomorrow I could be thrust into devastation. But today, right now, there's just the four directions, a wild meadow growing in my yard, my beloved baking bread in our old kitchen. Isn't that beautiful? Tomorrow I could be thrust into devastation, but today, right now, there's just the four directions, a wild meadow growing in my yard, my beloved baking bread in our old kitchen. And that's what happens when we learn to pay attention to the small pleasures of our lives. Now, depriving ourselves of pleasure deliberately, on the other hand, is almost always a mistake. In fact, forced asceticism can be almost as life-killing as drinking or drugging and so on. The refusal to feel, to enjoy, to indulge can become another kind of addiction. We've all known the New Age Puritans who use their virtue as a kind of cudgel to make other people feel perhaps less virtuous than they are. This drive to be good, to clean up our acts, to wipe away the sticky parts, is in fact spiritually destructive. How many of us spend our lives trying to be better or different than we are, and yet good remains somehow elusive because there's always more to be done in this futile effort at self-repair. The obsession with being good is in fact egomania masquerading as spirituality. It's a compulsion that blocks us from what's true. It cuts us off from our feelings, and it keeps us at odds with who we actually are. What's more, every spiritual seeker, sooner or later, who's caught in internal conflict of trying to be better, trying to get better, has to ask herself, who are they trying to make better exactly? Who or what are they trying to improve? What is this broken self-image that they carry of a character they can't quite put their finger on? What is this self that we're trying to repair? Rupert Spira, a non-dual teacher I admire a lot, likes to put it this way. He says, on whose behalf are we struggling? On whose behalf? We come to see that the more we struggle on the behalf of this little me, this self-image, the deeper we dig ourselves in a pit of ignorance. The further away we move from the fact that we are good already and we're not in need of constant judgment. Scientists and spiritual sages agree that our fundamental nature is one of cooperation and care and loyalty, empathy. We create systems of justice and fairness. We mold our lives, shape our lives, orient our lives toward the spiritual and the sacred. That is who we are. Our brains and our bodies are wired for these traits because they bind us together as people. It's not a matter of beating ourselves up in an effort to be good. When we move from the me to the we, and we follow our natural instincts and inclinations, we come to trust our fundamental goodness and our wholeness, which includes this interplay between the mind and the body. Now, let's talk just a little bit about the importance of play. Play. Play is a life-saving tool for human beings. We need to play in order to survive. It's part of our primordial wiring as creatures on a threatening planet. Because play connects us to the childlike dimension in us that doesn't age and is always plugged into the source of light and life. And remember, as Thomas More puts it, play and pleasure free the mind by interrupting the self-absorbed thinking that traps us and forcing one-pointed attention on something outside of ourselves. The form of play that we choose doesn't matter. What's important is that we indulge ourselves and use these time outs to renew and to reinvigorate and also to relax, to stop taking ourselves so damn seriously. That's why play is linked to resilience, and why even in the worst circumstances, people generally manage to play somehow, whether it's music or sport or games or making love, creating beautiful things, interacting with the natural world. This esprit de corps, this spirit of the body, helps to keep us alive. So ask yourself, what are you doing today to be playful, light, curious, fascinated by your own experience? How is your esprit de corps really doing? And what can you do to give it a lift? We're going to take a few minutes now to do a writing exercise together. So please take out a piece of paper, or you can use your computer. I'd like you now, please, to take 10 minutes to write about what you can do to lift your spirits and bring playfulness into your life today. What can you do to lift your spirits and bring playfulness into your life today? We'll take 10 minutes to do that, and then we'll come back together, please.